Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day, not just a good day. So in today's case, we're going to be talking about the Peterson family murders. This case took place in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan, and it was basically a very quiet place, at least mostly quiet. There were about 200 people living in the area at about 1967 at that time. It was known for farming and everybody knew basically everybody. So James Peterson moved to the Canadian province after serving in the World War II with his wife, Evelyn Peterson. He was a very hard worker. Like I said, he was really known. Everybody loved him. He decided to raise his kids and buy a 328-acre land to start his business. He also inherited his father's land after his father died. And it was a very known thing to be farming at that time. Like that was like the main job, the job that brings in most money. Large families were really common at that time in Canada, and Evelyn and James did not hold back because they had 9 children, namely Kathleen, 19 years old, Jean, 17 years old, Mary, 13 years old, Dorothy, 11 years old, Pearl, 9 years old, Phyllis, 4 years old, William, 5 years old, Colin, 2 years old, Larry, 1 year old. While growing up, they didn't give their parents trouble like other children would, especially the fact that they were many, I guess good genes. They were good children. They always performed very well in school. They were always going to church. But Kathleen got married and lived in British Columbia with her husband. So she was now the only one that was away from the family. So there were 4 rooms in their new house that they just moved to, and the parents and the youngest slept in 1 bedroom while the other children just had their way around of sleeping. There were lots. So some would sleep in the sitting room, some would sleep in the rooms. They were just basically alternating this around. Jean, which is the immediate daughter after Kathleen that got married, was really interested in sports. She loved playing games, and the dad also was sponsoring some of our extracurricular activities rather. And that was just basically it about that family. There wasn't much information on the other children because they were still quite little and very little known about them. Basically a perfect family. They have things going on for them. They might not be living as comfortable as you would think, but they are doing very okay. They love each other and life is going on great for them. And on the other side, not too far out, you can meet Victor Hoffman. Full name Victor Ernest Hoffman. He was born in 1946, and his father was German and his mom was Ukrainian. So they were from a devout family. So they were a family of devout Lutherans. Victor was the 5th out of 7 children, and him and his family were living at Lisk, which is like 40 miles away from Shell Lake. Not really in Shell Lake, but just at the outskirts, but basically like a village. And that particular part of town, Lisk, is known for families. Okay, families usually reside there, and usually hardworking families, families that farm. So it was just like a community that was built up, and everybody just knows it to be that. Growing up, Victor had a passion for hunting and guns, just like the other children that were around actually at that time. Usually when you're growing up, since farming was the main thing and hunting, at a very young age, especially the boys of the family, they get guns, they follow their dad to go hunt and bring meat back home. So it was like a normal thing. It wasn't anything weird, like how it would be weird in these times. He had excellent farming skills. Sometimes it would even shock his parents. Like sometimes the mom would plant something and he would explain to his mom how using this type of soil instead of this type of soil, how often to water it, like his knowledge on things. But he was academically not that bright, and he started getting worse over time. So the father noticed this and decided to take him to the hospital for treatment. Apparently he had been suffering way earlier than his father noticed, because Victor had schizophrenia. He would start saying things like he was seduced by Satan and God, and that Satan is about 6 feet tall, has a long tail, and will always tell him to do bad things. He would also say that sometimes he'll be sleeping and then he'll be awoken by tapping sounds. That's the devil waking him up and telling him to kill strangers or even his own family. So he was undergoing treatment, and he was getting better along the line. And so instead of directing that energy towards thinking of strangers or his family, he was directing that energy towards animals. He would often kill animals as pleasure. And let me tell you one thing, when you have a child, God forbid, and that child is interested in killing animals, it is most likely a sign that that child is going to be killing others, because we've seen this multiple times. Almost all stories, almost all cold cases, old cases, solved cases, like Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, like it's always a thing, like you kill animals when you are what, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why is that so interesting to you? So I feel like that's a common trait that someone can pick up and see from a young age. Like as an adult, you should see that, like, that's your child. You should know that, oh my gosh, like this boy or this girl is interested in killing animals. Why is that so much of a pleasure to hurt another living thing? So generally, killing animals made him happy, and his parents let him, because at least they're not human beings, right? They're animals, and we're going to kill them anyways to eat, so why not? Okay, yeah, fine. Moving forward, he was outside of his house one day after farming, and he said he saw a tall figure with a pig face told him to sell his soul, and that if he does sell his soul, he would make him rich, and that he should also bow down to him. He didn't want to obey this creature, so he was just stalling the creature. But according to what he said, the creature didn't want to leave, so he just bent down with one knee. So basically meaning that he'll be half as rich. Shortly after this, he started seeing an angel. And this angel, he said, would hardly visit him. Like he said, if the devil visits him like 7 times in a day, the angel basically visits him like probably 1 time a week. Like he hardly saw the angel, and the angel told him that if he catches the devil, that he would bring him to heaven. And because he did want to go to heaven, he tried so many times to catch the devil, but he failed. It got so bad to the extent that on May 27th of 1967, Victor's mother saw him shooting at the sky outside. She ran to meet him to ask him what the problem was, and apparently he was trying to shoot the devil. He was trying to still catch this devil so that he can have a free ticket to heaven. His mother, being scared and obviously not understanding what was going on, she understood, but she didn't believe that he actually carried a gun to actually shoot something. She was thinking, like, what if this was another human being that he shot? So she took him back inside, put him inside the car, and took him straight to the family pastor. When he was talking to the pastor heard him say, "I'd like to kill my mom." So this was a wrap for the pastor. The pastor basically enrolled him inside the Saskatchewan hospital where he was also undergoing more treatments. So this doctor actually diagnosed Victor with schizophrenia, and Victor was shouting and screaming that he didn't want to stay in a place for too long again, and that he was basically not schizophrenic, that everything he's seen is real. And he was also saying that he had physical pain on his body, and that his parents don't understand him, neither do his siblings, because he was talking about how he would tell his siblings that he sees something or that he saw something, and they would just make fun of him. So the siblings obviously didn't help. I'm guessing also because at the time that they were doing that, they didn't realize that he was sick, or they knew, and maybe in that time having schizophrenia was not that much of a big deal. I have no idea, but he was making his thoughts and pain known to his family, and they were not abiding according to what he said. So he said he didn't want to be here, that he didn't need to. He would also say that the devil put another brain in his body, and that person has its own identity called Denise. He was just basically spiraling out, and that was basically his whole months go by in that particular hospital. Along the line, he knew that if he kept saying that he could see the devil, that they were not going to allow him leave that place. So he started pretending that he was not seeing the devil anymore, started pretending to be aware and know what is real and what is fake. He was going through supportive psychotherapy and electroconstructive treatment alongside other things. So the doctor said that he was better now and he could go home as long as he's taking his drugs and his tranquilizers. But the impulse to kill was still very strong in him. So he was taking his drugs when he got back home to get better, because he himself also wanted to get better and he didn't want to have those thoughts anymore. But on this particular day, on the 8th of August, he decided not to take his drugs because he wanted to have energy to work on the farm. And according to him, he said that the drugs made him weak. So everything ended up becoming fine on the day that he didn't take his drugs. He did it the next day and the next day. And you know, when you're doing something and you're just getting positive results, in his head, he felt like he was fine, like he didn't need the drugs anymore to perform or to carry out his functions, all up until the 11th of August when he saw the devil again. And the devil told him to prove that he's on the devil's side. And he wanted to do that. But when he asked the devil what he was supposed to do to prove that he was on his side, the devil just disappeared. He didn't see anything again. The devil came back again on the 12th and said that he should prove that he's on his side. And he asked, what do I need to do to prove that to you? The devil disappeared again. According to him, the devil never came back again. He was just living his life normally without taking his drugs or his tranquilizers or anything that was supposed to help. And he thought that he was just doing fine. Then on August 14th of 1967, he was working on the farm and he slept off. His parents came by and, saw that he had slept off on the barn and told him to wake up to go sleep in his room. But when he got to his room, he couldn't sleep, so he just decided to continue his work on the farm. When he got to the farm, he was just pacing back and forth, he was just very restless. And while he was pacing back and forth, he was just allowing his imagination to run wild. He had a feeling that something was going to happen on the side of his head. And he was just wondering what it was going to be. And all of a sudden, he said he had this urge to kill. So he decided that he was just going to find some rodents to kill. But he couldn't find any rodents around the barn. So he decided he was going to enter inside the car and go look for rodents or squirrels. He preferred killing squirrels. But he didn't find any. So he just kept driving down all up until 6 a.m. He got to a particular area of town that he basically doesn't even really know. And he was seeing different houses, driving past them up until he got to this particular ordinary farmhouse. And a voice in his head said, this is it. This is where you are going to go and do it. He entered the house through the kitchen. And for some reason, he said the house looked very familiar. Immediately he walks through the kitchen, he turns to his left and he sees James Peterson eating in the kitchen, and just having a normal day. And James notices that there's an intruder, obviously, sees that there's a gun, but tries to fight him. And in the process of even trying to get close to him, Victor shot him 7 times. The bullets of the gun had finished, so he went back to the car that he drove to the house with to reload the gun. And in the process of going back to reload the gun, he saw Evelyn and her last child escaping through the window. He loaded the gun and shot Evelyn too. So Evelyn and the last child basically tumbled down from up the window and just hit the ground flat on the floor. He went back into the house to kill Dorothy, Mary, Jean, Pearl, William, and Colin in their beds. He looked around to make sure that nobody else was inside the house, so he left the home. And while he was getting back to the car, he noticed that the baby that Evelyn was carrying was not shot. So he went near the baby and shot the baby too. And he described this as a mercy killing because the baby was too young to fend for himself. After doing this, he went back again into the home and stole cartridge cases and put them inside the car and just went straight home. When he got home, he felt terrified and shocked as to what he had done. He was immediately regretting it. He was shaking, but the deed was already done. Apparently, James Peterson had already planned with one of his neighbors that they were going to go farming to raise some money because he was saying he needed some extra cash to sponsor his daughter's sports. So the neighbor came in the morning and was trying to call on James, but James wasn't responding. So he was even making fun outside of the house saying that James had slept off. But onto the right side of the house, he saw that the jar door was open, the side door. And it was shocking because usually he has never seen that door open, but he didn't think much of it. So he just went there, opened the door, and he saw James on the floor, dead, with 7 shots to his body. He goes back in to try to see if there are any survivors and he sees none. So he runs down to the nearest telephone drive and he makes a call to the police. The police comes to the house and they see that there was no forced entry. The house was not ransacked. There was no motive basically. So it was going to be very hard to find out who this person was. All they had as evidence were some boot marks from the boot of the person that entered into the house and from the pool of blood, and that there were 28 shots and 27 targets that actually killed the victims. Just when the police was about leaving the scene, they just heard a muffled noise upstairs. They go upstairs and right under the bodies of the girls that were inside the room, under the mattress, they see 4-year-old Phyllis. She was so confused, and the police officer that was in charge of the case carried Phyllis and basically started crying. It was when Phyllis saw this police officer cry that she knew that something wrong had happened, because she just stayed in there knowing that there was danger and there was no way she could tell what happened. She just knew that she was supposed to keep on staying in there. It was the worst thing that the police at that time had ever seen in their entire life. Phyllis was taken to her uncle that was living nearby. Kathleen moved all the way from British Columbia to come and take care of her sister because, as you all know, she was married. She was the only one that was not living with her family. And there was a search party of over 250 people trying to look for clues or who could have done this. And there were dogs also, you know. It was a really huge deal. The word spread around town and it was a really, really sad case. 4 days into looking for who this person was that killed this family, someone went to the police saying that his neighbor's child just came back from a mental hospital and also had the love for guns and hunting. The police had basically nothing on who could have done this. So this was the only information that they had that could at least lead to something. So they moved quickly and went to Shelbrook to find Victor. They arrested Victor and took the guns that were inside the household, or the gun that he was with. And the gun actually didn't match the description that they thought it was when they saw the gunshot, but they eventually did some testing and it was indeed that gun. It was a perfect match. On the 20th of August in 1967, Victor Hoffman was arrested for the murder of 9 members of the Peterson family. When he was arrested, he behaved quite normal, like nothing had basically happened. And after the burial of the family, 10 to 15 minutes, he was just quiet and basically said nothing. But after those minutes came by, he basically broke down crying and started confessing that it was the devil that made him do it, and that the only reason why he left Phyllis was because Phyllis looked like an angel. I was actually shocked when I read this case, because I actually at first thought that he didn't see Phyllis, but from his confession it seems that he actually did see her, but because she had the face of an angel, that was the reason why he didn't kill Phyllis. So the reason why he killed the other family members was because they looked like pigs. After listening to his confession, the police took him to the mental hospital and he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. His trial began on the 8th of January in 1968. He had 2 counts of non-capital murders, mental illness, and despite evidence, he was found not guilty for reasons of insanity. His state lawyer defended him that he was ill and driven by insanity, and everything that he saw that day he thought was real. The judge stated that he would be committed to an institution. Victor showed no emotion. He hated this even more than going to prison. He just hated hospitals and institutions for some very weird reason. So he was placed in this mental institution without definite time under government regulations. But in December of 2001, he was actually given access to go to nearby towns under supervision by the police. On the 21st of May of 2004, Victor Hoffman died in custody. And on the other side, the remaining family members that survived, Kathleen, that was married to her husband, that went to the British Columbia, and the little survivor, Phyllis, were living together. Kathleen and her husband quit farming and moved to a nearby town to continue their lives. This was also after their old family house got burned down. Before Victor even died, Kathleen and Phyllis had really deep frustrations when they heard that he was released on patrol, and they were really scared. They were just having lingering thoughts, and especially Phyllis, she had lingering memories of what happened that day, and she was always very scared. But they became at peace eventually in 2004 after hearing that he had died. And Phyllis actually had a son called James, and James was basically her healing remedy. She loved James so much, and James put her through a healing process that helped her to heal her process and her trauma. Phyllis eventually passed away due to cancer in 2019. Kathleen is still alive as of today, 2023, and she is the last remaining child of the Peterson family. A book titled The Shell Lake Massacre by Peter Tadman, he interviewed Victor, and Victor says that he had no regrets and that he feels no guilt because he knows that he saw the devil. So this was before Victor died, obviously. So this was basically the end of this case. And boy, was this a story. Like, this is not even something that could have been avoided, because it could have happened to anybody. This family was just on their own, living their lives like every other person and their neighbors, and this man just decided to pick their house because it looks familiar and the devil told him to. And he believed that this was what was going to happen that day. And I don't know, I really saw some comments on some people saying, why couldn't he have just killed his family? Why did he have to go to another family? It was his family that caused this anyways. They knew the kind of problem he had, and they weren't being strict about it. They were supposed to have left him in a mental institution. It was like, the deed is already done. And it's quite sad that it happened to an innocent family that had no idea that this was what was going to happen. And I feel that it just brought a lot of trauma, especially to Phyllis. And I hope that they will rest in peace. And that will be the end of this case, guys. Thank you guys for listening to the end, and I'll be seeing you in my next video.